unfortunately, the weekend didn't start off all that hot for somebody, like the greatest of all time, Bill Belichick, because apparently nobody wants him, which is a lonely, lonely place to be after the news that came out yesterday. And I don't know how surprised you guys were, but I was surprised. Raheem Morris named the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. They are the only team that has interviewed Belichick. There are 2 remaining spots. There's Seattle, there's Washington. And so Belichick is sitting looking around going, okay, so I got nothing else lined up. And then it comes to find out that not only is Belichick not going to be the guy in Atlanta, and it's going to be Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator from the LA Rams, who does have previous experience, but there was a thought that, well, maybe Belichick just didn't see eye to eye with Rich McKay, the CEO there. And now it turns out, according to Adam Schefter, that they're not even reporting back to Rich McKay under this new structure. They'll be general manager Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris now report to Arthur Blank, not Rich McKay. So now I'm trying to figure out.
It still played a role. I mean, look, Schefter has his side of things. We kind of heard Albert Breer report about his side of it. The experience between Rich McKay and Raheem Morris previously, and those two have known one another, played a big role in it as far as their comfort. It largely comes down to if Bill Belichick was going to be the head coach. Rich McKay and him, they've had their past. It is what it is. But everyone would be working underneath Bill Belichick. That's the reality of that structure. And that just wasn't going to fly with Rich McKay, with Terry Fontenot, how the organization would work. So that's what's been happening kind of behind the scenes. And I think the toughest thing for Bill Belichick moving forward is it's not that no one wants him. I think he needs the right fit. But he's now going to be a year older before that next opportunity comes, if it comes. And I think there's a couple of places that, maybe he would be interested in. But those opportunities aren't alive right now. That's just the reality of it. I think Atlanta made a decision where they feel like this is what they foresee for their future. And someone who's going to be able to work side by side with Terry Fontenot, which is a better structure for them. But ultimately that's not going to be the structure if you bring in Bill Belichick. It's Belichick and everyone else. He's going to be the one that ultimately goes up to the owner and with Arthur Blank. So this took a turn about a week ago when I think Rich McKay and Terry Fontenot didn't feel comfortable with that sort of structure. And since then, it's really kind of opened back up to a lot of other candidates and a different kind of structure to what they want to move forward.
Sometimes who you are is a great asset, and sometimes who you are can be a great liability. And the things that have made historically Bill Belichick successful and has been an asset, at this point, it's not perceived as an asset somewhere else. And I was saying it and during the show all along, like, man, it's got to be, and when you think about it, it's going to be hard for Bill Belichick to find a place to coach. I mean, and it's not for any other reason than all the reasons that are being discussed. Is that when you bring in a guy of his status and his stature, he is the greatest of all time in coaching and in football for certain, and could be debated in other circles and arenas. What can you do in order to appease a man that had the type of control that he had in New England? And how can you ensure that your organization is going to go in the right direction, knowing that the only recourse you're going to have is to do it exactly the way he wants it done? Oh, no, you're wrong, Bill. Got to let you know, we're not going to do that. Like, how are you going to tell Bill Belichick, no, we don't want to do that? How are you going to tell Bill Belichick, that's not going to, like, no, you can't do that? It just doesn't seem feasible for anybody to be able to bring him into their doors And at some point in time, if there's something that you don't like about what he's doing, if it turned out to be something that you weren't comfortable with, you're going to be sitting in the corner shaking. You're not going to speak your piece. You're not going to say this needs to change and this isn't correct. You're not going to do it. And I just don't see how any organization at this point would feel confident bringing that type of power into their doors. It totally will disrupt everything that's going. You almost would have to get rid of everyone there and bring in all Bill Belichickians. That would be the best way for you to get done what you want to get done, because at the end of the day, and maybe I'm overstating it, but just based off of how I've heard things have been ran and have been done in New England, that's pretty much it's like there's a blurred line of where Bill Belichick and his influence over who's who and where it ends and where it starts for Kraft, and where his people and where that starts and where that ends. Like it's a blurred line. And I think that's more of a liability trying to figure out if that's going to mesh well. On paper, it sounds amazing to hire him. It sounds unbelievable to hire Bill Belichick. But there is a lot that would come with it, perceivably, whether for good or for bad. For Bill Belichick, he's accomplished what he's accomplished. He's done some amazing things, but, man, I mean, you would have to assume it's going to be a daunting task for the people that have to work for him that weren't hired by him. And have to still do what they do.
Unless a year away he realizes, all right, I got to adjust. So I've got to be able to work in this new climate, this new NFL, and I've got to report to people that maybe I didn't have with New England. That's why I was curious to ask Breer yesterday when Albert Breer was with us, like, hey, if Belichick, loved his situation in New England so much, like, whose idea was it for him to go? And it was no. He was basically fired. Like, it was Robert Kraft saying, you got to go. And now he's looking around for a similar fit elsewhere, and they just don't exist in the NFL. It's kind of crazy. And then, listen, Mike Vrabel's still out there. And it looks like if you tie everything together, there's a lot of people that feel like, Ben Johnson's the favorite to land the Washington gig. Dan Quinn in Seattle makes a lot of sense. Those are the two openings remaining. So we could be looking at Belichick and Mike Vrabel, who were two quality candidates, quality coaches, have won a bunch of games, that are going to be kind of sitting there holding their you-know-what while everybody else is, moving on with their lives next year.
Well, for Mike Vrabel, it's not the worst thing in the world, because he could do a number of things. If he wants to set out for a year, do TV, he gets that. He gets that opportunity. He's young enough where he's going to have many opportunities moving forward. You don't want to necessarily, if you're in his shoes, pick the wrong opportunity, be stuck there for the next 2-3 years, and then, hurt your legacy and reputation where you might not get another shot. So for him, it's a different situation than for Bill Belichick. Time's running out in the sense that he's 72 years old. And I think that might have played a factor as well into, how much ultimately are going to be able to invest into a coach where you really don't know how much longer he's going to be there. And if you are creating this organizational structure, and I think this was probably some of the pushing from some of the folks in the front office for the Atlanta Falcons, which, again, it wasn't a secret. I mean, this started about a week ago. And so regardless of what Schefter wants to say with the structure with Rich McKay, the reality of the matter is there's a group of the front office who wasn't a fan of what that structure would look like with Bill Belichick. And if you bring in Bill Belichick and you create that structure, well, what happens when he leaves in 3 years or 4 years, whatever the case may be? Now that structure is going to have to change anyway for however it's going to work moving forward, or you have to find a head coach that's similar to Mike Shanahan that has that sort of power. So his age / the structure became, I think, the biggest issue for Arthur Blank ultimately not being able to be the one to make that decision, where others got involved and they believed Raheem Morris was a better candidate for what Atlanta wants to do moving forward. And by the way, Raheem Morris didn't get enough credit this year for how good of a job he did with that defense. I mean, it was Aaron Donald and a bunch of young guys around him.
Yeah.
And it's no disrespect to those players, but that was a roster that between, if you look at Matt Stafford on offense, Donald on defense, I mean, they really had to work some magic around some of those pieces. I mean, yes, Cooper Kupp, but Puka Nacua had a hell of a year. Obviously, both edge rushers for the Rams had a hell of a year. And some of that's, a byproduct of Aaron Donald getting so much attention. But Raheem Morris flew under the radar as, hey, this is a playoff team, and largely because of the way their defense was able to help get them there. So excited for him that he gets another opportunity. Good coach, great guy. I think he'll do well there. The only thing I always worry about with this sort of structure is when you hear about, the front office, they're afraid of Belichick being the guy to kind of oversee all of it. Well, it's all right, he was the most successful in NFL history.
Right.
What's wrong with that? It's really it's all power plays. It's like a house of cards, and everyone wants to still remain and be a part of it, and that's fine. And hopefully it works out. But there's a reason why New England was so successful for such a long period of time. Yes, Tom Brady was a huge piece of it amongst a bunch of other Hall of Fame and great players. But the Bill Belichick factor to all of that was a huge factor as well.
But you see, and it's also open season on him. You see the guy go. Bill, there's a picture that's out there. Hopefully, it's not a fake. It probably is at this point. But Belichick's in a Chick-fil-A in the Atlanta area, just buying food by himself, just sitting there at the front, got a tie on.
That was after the first interview.
Was it?
Yeah, that was weeks ago.
But doesn't that show a guy who's a man of the people? Doesn't it show a guy who's not out there trying to send somebody else in? He's not going to go through a drive-through. He's not ashamed. He'll walk right into a Chick-fil-A. He'll walk right up in his suit and tie after an interview.
It shows that you need to be on social media more to be of this stuff.
Hey, I caught wind of the picture last night, so I don't know where it was from.
You're late to the party, buddy.
But point is, that's a man of the people. He deserves an opportunity, and he's getting shamed and ousted by this new era of NFL. And I don't like it. I think it's disrespectful.
It's ageism is what it is.
Yeah.